Angel Reese said she was the Michael Jordan of the WNBA. And the league didn't just react. It snapped to attention like somebody pulled a fire alarm in a quiet building. Because in sports, you can call yourself a lot of things and people will let it slide. A star, a dog, a problem, a future legend. But the second you bring up Jordan, you're not just talking confidence anymore. You're inviting a scoreboard conversation. And that's the part most people miss. The internet doesn't hear a Jordan comparison as motivation. It hears it as a challenge. It hears, judge me like the greatest. It hears, measure me like the standard. So the second those words leave your mouth, every clip gets sharper. Every box score gets louder. And every miss starts feeling like it has a caption attached to it. Now here's where this story gets messy in the most entertaining way possible. The moment that truly flipped it from talk into headline didn't happen on some debate show where people are paid to argue. It didn't happen on a highlight reel. It didn't even happen in a post-game scrum where someone can shrug and say, "I was emotional." It happened in the one place that's supposed to feel safe. Angel Reese's own podcast, her own MIC, her own space. And sitting across from her wasn't some random hot take merchant looking for clicks. It wasn't a hater. It wasn't a troll with an agenda. It was Lisa Leslie, a real blueprint. A name that doesn't need volume to be respected. A legend who knows exactly what the job is supposed to look like when you're built to live around the rim. So imagine how that lands. You've got a young star building a brand, building an identity, building a voice. You're trying to expand beyond the court, because the truth is women's basketball is finally getting the attention it's deserved for years. And anybody with common sense understands you'd be crazy not to take advantage of the moment. You're building a following, a platform, a presence. You're not just playing games. You're shaping your future. But while you're doing that, another force is happening in real time. Caitlin Clark is pulling the kind of numbers that turn casual sports fans into regular viewers and turn regular viewers into a market. The league signs a huge long-term media package beginning in 2026. And the reported value being discussed publicly is around $2 billion over 11 years, which is the kind of number that changes how people talk about the entire sport. And that's the tension the whole internet has been circling like a storm cloud. Not who's more famous, not who has more fans, not who talks more. The real tension is who's actually moving the needle, and who's just making noise. Because in the modern WNBA spotlight, you can be a great player and still get dragged if the wrong part of your game becomes a meme. You can be a dominant rebounder and still have the conversation twisted into, "Yeah, but can she finish?" You can be building something real and still get treated like you're all hype if the clips don't match the confidence. And the craziest part is Angel didn't even walk into that episode thinking she was about to get pressed. She didn't bring Lisa Leslie on expecting a public diagnosis. Most people invite legends on their show for praise, stories, and that nice, clean validation that turns into shareable clips. That's how these things usually go. But what happened instead was way more brutal and way more valuable. Because Lisa Leslie didn't do the usual polite thing. She didn't sugarcoat. She didn't hide behind vague compliments. She looked Angel Reese in the face and went straight for the one thing the internet was already whispering about. And that's when the story stopped being funny. Because when a legend says it out loud on your platform, it's not just a joke anymore. It's a label. And once that label sticks, everything you say next gets filtered through it. But to understand why that moment hit like a slap across the timeline, you have to go back to the very first spark. The quote that turned regular criticism into a full-on obsession. Because the Jordan comparison wasn't just confidence, it was fuel. And the second it hit the air, people started digging for reasons to either crown her or clown her. And what they found next is exactly why this story got so loud. Because it wasn't just what she said. It was what her game looked like when people went looking. And once that happened, the internet didn't let go. But that wasn't the whole story. Because the quote didn't just create pressure, it created a trap. The Jordan line is one of those things that sounds powerful in your own head right up until you remember the world is listening. Because Michael Jordan isn't a nickname. It's not a vibe. It's not a mood. It's a resume. It's a myth built out of cold numbers and painful moments, and a reputation that survived every era of scrutiny. People don't hear Jordan and think confidence. They think results. They think you better be able to back this up when it matters. So when Angel Reese put her name in that sentence, it didn't land like a normal self-hype moment. It landed like she walked into a room full of strangers and said, "Treat me like the standard." And here's what makes Angel's situation different from the way the internet tries to frame it. She's not some nobody chasing attention. She's been a spotlight figure for years. She's been polarizing since college. She's built a brand that people can't stop talking about, whether they love her or can't stand her. She's the type of athlete who doesn't just play, she performs. She understands cameras. She understands narrative. She understands how to turn a season into a conversation. And in today's sports world, that's not extra. That's survival. Because let's keep it real, women's basketball players don't get paid like the men. The on-court only approach might sound noble, but it's also how you end up with a short career and long regrets. Angel Reese is one of the first new wave stars who's been completely open about the fact that the game is bigger than the game. She's building beyond the court. She's trying to be bigger than the box score. And whether people admit it or not, that mentality is part of why the WNBA is growing so fast right now. But the problem is the internet doesn't reward nuance. The internet rewards contrast. And there is no contrast sharper than, "I'm the Michael Jordan of this league," paired with, "Wait, what do the numbers say?" Because the moment you trigger that curiosity, people don't search for your best games first. They search for your worst clips first. They look for the miss that makes the quote look ridiculous. They look for the moment that lets them feel like they caught you. They look for the evidence that your confidence is actually delusion. And that's what turned this into a whole thing. Not Angel's ambition. Not even the quote by itself. It was what happened after the quote left the room. Because once you say Jordan, you don't get graded like a promising young star anymore. You get graded like a finished product. You get graded like an icon. You get graded like you're already at the top. And in sports, that's a dangerous game. Angel Reese didn't just give people a headline. She gave them a measuring stick. And the second a measuring stick appears, the loudest voices rush in to decide where you fall on it. And here's where the story starts to split into two different realities. In one reality, Angel Reese is a young star who already does multiple elite things. The kind of player who can dominate a possession without scoring, who can flip momentum with hustle, who can turn missed shots into second chances, who can live on the glass like it's her property. In that reality, she's exactly what the WNBA needs. Personality, competitiveness, edge, a star that makes people feel something. But in the other reality, the one the internet prefers because it's cleaner and meaner, Angel Reese becomes a single storyline. The layups. That's the trap. Because when you've got a loud brand, people don't want your full game. They want a simple label they can repeat, something catchy, something they can turn into a meme, something they can spam in comments without thinking. And once the Jordan quote spread, the label wrote itself. People went straight to the most brutal part of her offensive profile, efficiency. She shot 39.1% from the field as a rookie. A number that got repeated everywhere, because it's easy to understand and easy to weaponize. Now, that number by itself doesn't tell the whole story. It never does. Shot selection, role, defensive attention, and the fact that rookies often have messy efficiency while they adjust, all of that matters. But again, nuance doesn't trend. Contrast trends. So the discourse became simple. Michael Jordan is the greatest finisher and shot maker in history. And Angel Reese had a field goal percentage sitting at a number people associate with struggle. And once that comparison is in the air, everything gets uglier. Because the next step isn't analysis. It's humiliation. The next step is, let's clip every miss. The next step is, let's laugh at the rimouts. The next step is, let's turn it into a running joke. From there the storyline grows legs. It's not even about whether Angel can score anymore. It's about whether Angel can score the easy ones. The ones fans believe should be automatic if you're going to say the word Jordan with a straight face. That's why the quote mattered so much. If she had compared herself to a player known for rebounding, defense, hustle, and chaos, people might have argued, but the argument would have stayed softer. But Jordan is the ultimate symbol of inevitability. Jordan is the symbol of you can't stop it. So when Angel Reese said it, people didn't just hear confidence. They heard inevitability. And then they went looking for proof. And when the proof didn't look clean, when the misses looked loud, the internet did what it always does. It turned a complicated athlete into a simple joke. And here's the part that makes the whole thing even more intense. Angel Reese wasn't talking from some quiet corner. She was talking as a player with real momentum. She wasn't invisible. She was already in the conversation. She was already a star in the WNBA. So when she said Jordan, it wasn't a harmless statement. It was a power move. And power moves get tested immediately, violently, publicly. That's when this stopped being about one quote and became about something deeper. The difference between claiming greatness and carrying greatness. Because claiming it is easy. Carrying it is brutal. Carrying it means your worst nights become everyone's favorite content. Carrying it means your off nights become your identity. Carrying it means every microphone becomes a courtroom. And the second Angel Reese said Jordan, she walked into that courtroom voluntarily. But here's the twist. Even that still wasn't what made this story explode. The quote created the pressure. The memes created the noise. The criticism created the heat. But the moment that truly changed the temperature was when someone with undeniable authority, someone who doesn't need to prove anything, sat across from Angel Reese and basically confirmed what the internet was already screaming. Because once Lisa Leslie says the words out loud, it's no longer fans being messy. It's no longer haters exaggerating. It becomes official. And when it becomes official, it changes what the quote means. It turns, "I'm the Michael Jordan of the WNBA," from bold confidence into a statement that invites one brutal response. Okay. Then why is this still a problem? That's why what happened next felt so cold. Because Lisa Leslie didn't come in to argue about Angel's personality. She didn't come in to debate her popularity. She didn't come in to attack her brand. She went straight to the simplest, most painful part of the conversation, the part that's hardest to dodge. And she said her biggest advice was about layups. Flat out. Directly. And she said it on Angel's own show. That's not a tweet. That's not a reaction clip. That's not somebody taking a cheap shot from the sidelines. That's a legend looking you in the eyes and saying, "This is what we're fixing." And when a legend says fixing, that word carries weight. Because fixing means it's broken. And broken is the last word you want attached to your name right after you put yourself next to Michael Jordan. So by the end of this moment, the stage was set. Angel Reese had ambition loud enough to fill arenas. The internet had a storyline sharp enough to cut her down. And Lisa Leslie had just stepped into the middle of it, turning a viral joke into a serious basketball conversation. And when that happens, it stops being about a quote. It becomes about a reckoning. But what happened next made the whole situation feel 10 times more personal. Because the correction didn't happen in public. It happened at home. The problem with viral sports narratives is that they rarely stay fair for long. Once a single weakness becomes entertaining to talk about, the internet doesn't just point it out. It builds an entire storyline around it. A missed shot turns into a clip. A clip turns into a compilation. A compilation turns into a meme. And before long, the conversation stops being about the player's full game and starts being about that one specific flaw. That's exactly what happened to Angel Reese. Because the moment people started focusing on the finishing struggles around the rim, the clips started spreading everywhere. Every missed layup. Every awkward bounce off the rim. Every sequence where the ball seemed to hang in the air, just a little too long before dropping out. Those moments became the type of content the internet loves. Short, visual, easy to laugh at, and perfect for turning into running jokes. And the truth is, Finishing around the rim is one of the most unforgiving parts of basketball when it comes to perception. A three-point miss doesn't feel embarrassing. Even great shooters miss most of their threes. But a layup? Fans assume those are automatic. They expect them to fall. When they don't, the miss looks louder than it actually is. So when the conversation started focusing on Reese's efficiency near the basket, it didn't take long for that single detail to overshadow everything else she was doing on the court. And that's the frustrating part for players in situations like this. Because Angel Reese wasn't invisible in the box score, far from it. In fact, she was doing things that coaches obsess over. The dirty work that keeps possessions alive. She was crashing the glass, grabbing rebounds in traffic, fighting through contact, and playing with the kind of physical energy that often changes the entire rhythm of a game. Reese quickly built a reputation as one of the most relentless rebounders in the WNBA, stacking double-digit boards night after night and showing the type of motor that drives opponents crazy. But none of that makes a viral clip. Rebounding dominance doesn't travel across social media the way a missed layup does. Hustle plays rarely become memes. A player can control the glass for 40 minutes and still wake up the next morning to see the timeline talking about one missed shot instead. And that's exactly the trap Reese walked into. Because once the layup storyline caught fire, every broadcast started mentioning it. Analysts began discussing it. Commentators started referencing it during games. And fans who had barely watched her play before suddenly had a simple talking point they could repeat: layups. It became the shorthand for everything. It didn't matter that Reese was doing multiple other things at a high level. It didn't matter that rookies almost always struggle with efficiency while adjusting to the speed and physicality of the professional game. Once the label stuck, the internet treated it like it was the only part of her game that mattered. And that's when the clips really started circulating. You could open any social platform and see slow-motion replays of misses at the rim, stitched together into compilations that racked up views faster than actual highlight reels. Some were exaggerated for comedy. Some were edited to emphasize awkward angles. Some were just raw game footage replayed again and again with captions designed to provoke reactions. Within weeks, the layup storyline had become a full-blown online obsession. And the irony is that Angel Reese herself wasn't hiding from the conversation. She wasn't ducking interviews or pretending everything was perfect. If anything, she leaned into the spotlight the same way she always had. Reese continued appearing in media, continued speaking openly about her goals, and continued building her presence beyond the court with podcast appearances and social content. That approach is part of what made her so polarizing. Some fans loved it. They saw confidence, personality, and the type of charisma that can grow the sport. Others saw it differently. They believed the attention should follow production, not the other way around. And when those two perspectives collide, the debate gets loud. Because sports fans are brutally simple when it comes to one thing: performance. They don't mind personality. They don't mind trash talk. They don't mind swagger. In fact, most of the time they enjoy it. But they expect the performance to match the energy. And when they believe the balance is off, they react. So Reese's confidence, the same confidence that made her a star in college and helped build her brand, suddenly became fuel for criticism. The louder the personality looked, the louder the scrutiny became. Every statement was examined. Every stat was posted. Every missed shot was replayed. And the layup storyline only grew stronger. But the situation became even more complicated, because Reese wasn't the only player dominating the conversation around the WNBA. At the exact same time all of this was unfolding, Caitlin Clark was drawing a completely different type of attention. Clark's games were becoming television events. Arenas were filling up. Ratings were climbing. Casual fans who had never watched a WNBA game before were suddenly tuning in just to see what the hype was about. And that contrast, whether fair or not, started shaping the entire conversation around the league. One player was being discussed for what she was saying. The other was being discussed for what the numbers were doing. The comparison wasn't always direct, but it was impossible to ignore. Every time Reese's efficiency came up, someone would point to Clark's impact on viewership or ticket sales. Every time Clark's popularity was mentioned, someone would bring up Reese's personality and brand presence. It created a narrative battle that went far beyond basketball. Production versus persona. Numbers versus noise. And whether Reese liked it or not, the layup storyline became the center of that debate. But here's the thing people often forget. When these narratives explode, players inside the game see everything differently than fans online. The internet turns weaknesses into jokes. Veterans turn them into teaching moments. And that's where Lisa Leslie entered the picture. Because while social media was busy laughing at the misses and commentators were debating efficiency, Leslie saw something completely different. She saw a young big with elite rebounding instincts. She saw a player who was constantly in position near the rim. She saw someone getting to the right spots, but not finishing the way dominant post players are expected to finish. To Leslie, that wasn't a punchline. It was a fixable problem. And that difference in perspective is exactly why the next moment in this story mattered so much. Because when fans criticize a player, it can always be dismissed as noise. When commentators debate stats, players can brush it off as media talk. But when a Hall of Famer sits down across from you and calmly points out the same flaw everyone else has been joking about, the conversation suddenly changes. It stops feeling like trolling. It starts feeling like reality. And that's exactly what happened when Lisa Leslie walked into Angel Reese's podcast studio. Because Reese might have expected encouragement. She might have expected stories from a legend. She might have expected the kind of praise most young stars hear when they interview someone from the previous generation. What she probably didn't expect was for the first major piece of advice from one of the greatest post players in history to be about the exact thing the internet had been laughing at for weeks. And when Leslie finally said it out loud, calmly and directly, the moment hit harder than any meme ever could. Because suddenly, the viral jokes had a Hall of Fame voice behind them. And that's when the story stopped being internet entertainment and turned into something much more serious. The most uncomfortable truth in sports is that criticism hits differently depending on who says it. Fans yelling on social media? Easy to ignore. Random commentators arguing on TV? Players shrug that off all the time. But when someone who actually dominated your position for a decade calmly points out a flaw, suddenly it's not just noise anymore. And that's exactly what made the Lisa Leslie moment so powerful. Because Lisa Leslie isn't just another former player with an opinion. She's one of the architects of the WNBA's early dominance. A Hall of Famer. A champion. A player who spent years living in the exact same area of the floor Angel Reese operates in. Battling for rebounds, finishing through contact, controlling the paint. So when Leslie talks about what a dominant big should look like around the rim, she's not theorizing. She's remembering. When she appeared on Angel Reese's podcast, the expectation was probably simple. Fans assumed it would be a conversation about the growth of the league, Reese's journey, maybe some stories from Leslie's playing days. Respectful. Supportive. Positive. Instead, the conversation went somewhere completely different. Because early in the discussion, Leslie looked directly at Reese and gave her the most honest advice she could give. Not about branding, not about media attention, not about popularity. About layups. She told Reese flat out that the biggest thing she wanted to work with her on was how she finished around the rim. The mechanics, the touch, the way the ball comes off the glass, the way a big player should convert the easiest shot in basketball. And she didn't whisper it privately. She said it on air. Right there in front of everyone listening. Now the tone wasn't cruel. It wasn't mocking. Leslie wasn't trying to embarrass Reese or tear her down. If anything, the moment sounded like a veteran giving honest mentorship. She emphasized that the issue was fixable. She even highlighted Reese's improvements in other areas. Her defense, her ball handling, her energy. But the point was still clear. If Reese wanted to dominate the paint the way elite bigs do, finishing had to improve. And that moment mattered because it confirmed something people inside the game had been quietly thinking. Angel Reese was already doing many things at a high level. Her rebounding instincts were elite. Her motor was relentless. Her physicality made opponents uncomfortable. But the finishing piece, consistently converting close-range opportunities, was still a work in progress. And that's the detail that separates good players from truly dominant ones. Because when a big player can control the glass and finish efficiently at the rim, the entire offense opens up. Defenders collapse. Double teams arrive. Passing lanes appear. Suddenly, that player becomes a gravitational force inside the paint. Lisa Leslie knew that. She had lived that role. So when she told Reese they needed to work on layups, she wasn't delivering an insult. She was describing the next step. But that's not how the internet heard it. The internet heard confirmation. For weeks, fans had been joking about Reese's finishing struggles. Memes had spread everywhere. Clips had circulated. Comment sections had turned the issue into a running gag. And now a Hall of Famer had acknowledged the exact same problem. Suddenly, the memes didn't feel like exaggeration anymore. They felt like evidence. That's why the moment exploded online. Not because Leslie was harsh, she wasn't, but because the setting made it impossible to ignore. This wasn't criticism coming from across the league. It was coming from across the table. Angel Reese's own podcast. Angel Reese's own microphone. Angel Reese sitting there hearing it in real time. And what made the moment even more powerful was how Reese reacted. She didn't get defensive. She didn't shut the conversation down. She didn't pretend the problem didn't exist. She listened. The discussion slowly turned into something closer to a coaching session than a confrontation. Leslie talked about repetition, angles, soft finishes, and the daily grind required to develop touch around the rim. Hundreds of shots. Practicing different angles. Learning how to release quickly before defenders arrive. In that moment, the narrative shifted. For weeks the internet had treated Reese's finishing struggles as a punchline. Lisa Leslie treated it like a project. And that revealed something important. Young players are rarely finished products. Even the most talented rookies enter the league with holes in their game. The jump from college to the professional level is brutal. Defenders are stronger. Rotations are faster. The margin for error is smaller. And Reese was experiencing exactly that transition. But while Leslie was giving Reese honest advice about improving her finishing, another topic kept creeping into the conversation. Caitlin Clark. Clark's name was appearing everywhere. Ratings reports, attendance records, sponsorship deals, television coverage. And during that same discussion, Leslie made something very clear. She had no problem acknowledging Clark's impact. In fact, she praised it. Leslie explained that when one player brings attention and revenue into the league, every player benefits from that growth. When one player eats, we all eat. It was a simple phrase, but it carried a deeper meaning. Leslie wasn't framing the situation as a rivalry. She wasn't saying Reese had to compete with Clark for attention. She was explaining something bigger. Clark's popularity could help create more opportunities for everyone. More viewers, more sponsorships, more investment, more money flowing into the sport. And that perspective highlighted the real shift happening in women's basketball. The sport was growing rapidly. Television networks were investing. New fans were arriving. A new generation of players, Reese, Clark, and others, were stepping into the spotlight at exactly the right moment. But with that spotlight came pressure. Pressure to perform. Pressure to improve. Pressure to prove the attention was deserved. And that pressure only intensified when the business numbers started coming out. The league finalized one of the most important deals in its history. A long-term media rights agreement reportedly worth about $2 billion over 11 years involving major companies like Disney, Amazon, and NBC Universal. That number changed the entire conversation about the WNBA. Suddenly, the question wasn't whether the league could survive. The question became how big it could become. Expansion teams were being discussed. Arenas were filling. Sponsorship deals were increasing. And at the center of the attention was Caitlin Clark. Her games were drawing massive audiences. Indiana Fever games were selling out. Some opponents even moved matchups to larger arenas, when Clark came to town, because demand was so high. When networks see that level of viewership, advertisers follow. And when advertisers follow, the money flows into the league. That's why Leslie's comment mattered. She wasn't denying Clark's impact, she was explaining its economic reality. Clark was helping grow the entire sport. But that reality also created tension. Because when one player dominates the spotlight, people start asking uncomfortable questions about everyone else. Was the league leaning too heavily on Clark's popularity? Were other stars being overlooked? Was the coverage balanced? Those debates exploded across sports talk shows, podcasts, and social media. Some players embraced the growth. Others felt the spotlight had become uneven. And sitting right in the middle of that storm was Angel Reese, a young star still developing her game, while the entire league was entering its biggest spotlight in history. Because Angel Reese had her own massive following. She had built a powerful personal brand. She had become one of the most recognizable faces in women's basketball. But the narrative surrounding her looked completely different from the one surrounding Caitlin Clark. Clark was being discussed as an engine for the league's economic boom. Reese was being discussed for her personality, her confidence, and the flaws in her offensive efficiency. And whether that contrast was fair or not, it shaped the public conversation. Every time Clark's ratings numbers were mentioned, someone brought up Reese's viral layup clips. Every time Reese's popularity was highlighted, someone compared it to Clark's statistical production. The debate became unavoidable. Not because the two players were directly competing with each other every night, but because they represented two very different storylines unfolding at the same time. One storyline was about market impact. The other was about development and controversy. And when those narratives collided, fans started framing the entire discussion in simple terms. Production versus persona. Numbers versus noise. Who is truly changing the league, and who still has something to prove? But the truth is, the story wasn't that simple. Because Angel Reese wasn't just a controversial personality. She was also building something of her own. Her brand partnerships were growing. Her social media presence was enormous. Her podcast platform was attracting major guests. Companies were betting on her long-term star power the same way sponsors were betting on Clark's on-court production. And that's when the conversation shifted again. Because once endorsements and sponsorships entered the picture, the debate stopped being purely about basketball. It became about business, brand power, and marketability. In modern sports, players can build influence in two different ways. Statistical dominance on the court, personality and visibility off the court, and suddenly, the WNBA had stars representing both paths. Which meant the question people kept asking grew even bigger. It wasn't just who is the better player. It was something far more complicated. Which type of star actually moves the market? Then the conversation took another turn. Because once the Indiana Fever started clicking as a team, the narrative shifted again. Suddenly, it wasn't just about individual stars anymore. It was about winning. And winning has a way of silencing debates. For a while, critics had a simple complaint about the Fever. They argued that Caitlin Clark was carrying too much of the load. The idea was that the team relied heavily on her playmaking and scoring, and if she had an off night, the offense stalled. Early in the season, there was some truth to that. Clark was a rookie adjusting to the speed of the professional game, while also handling the pressure of being the most talked about player in the league. Opposing teams built their entire defensive strategies around stopping her. Every arena she entered was packed with fans waiting to see what she would do next. That kind of attention is exhausting. But something interesting started happening as the season progressed. The pieces around Clark began developing. Lexi Hull quietly turned into one of the most valuable role players on the roster. She wasn't the type of player who demanded headlines, but she brought toughness, intelligence, and relentless defense. Hull made smart cuts and capitalized on the opportunities Clark created with her passing. Then there was Aliyah Boston. Boston gave the Fever something every successful team eventually needs: a reliable interior presence. While Clark stretched defenses with her shooting and passing, Boston anchored the paint with strength and efficiency. She could finish through contact and force defenses to respect the inside game. That balance made the Fever far more difficult to defend. If opponents focused entirely on Clark's perimeter offense, Boston punished them inside. If they collapsed into the paint, Clark punished them from deep. Suddenly, the offense looked like a puzzle instead of a single piece. Kelsey Mitchell added another scoring dimension with her ability to create shots off the dribble, while Sophie Cunningham brought an aggressive edge that made opponents uncomfortable. Put all those pieces together, and the Fever started looking less like a team carried by a rookie, and more like a balanced roster with a clear identity. Clark was still the engine. But now the engine had the parts around it. And when that happens in sports, everything changes. Because winning games reshapes narratives. For months critics had questioned whether Clark's hype was sustainable. Instead, she kept evolving. Her elite passing vision was already one of the best in basketball, but as the season progressed she added more scoring, sharper decision-making, and better defensive reads. Defenders couldn't trap her easily anymore. If they doubled her, she found the open teammate. If they sagged off, she shot. If they pressured the perimeter, she attacked. And as her teammates grew more comfortable, the offense started moving faster. Meanwhile, Fever home games became some of the hottest tickets in the WNBA. Fans packed arenas early. Every possession felt like it could produce a highlight: deep three-pointers, no-look passes, sudden scoring runs. Those moments filled sports shows the next morning and flooded social media feeds. And highlight moments drive viewership. Viewership drives revenue. That's why the Fever became appointment television. Fans weren't just watching games if they happened to be on. They were planning their evenings around them. But while Indiana's momentum was building, the situation looked very different for the Chicago Sky. The team faced instability, roster questions, and uncertainty about direction. Reports of locker room tension circulated in media coverage. And right in the middle of that environment was Angel Reese. She remained one of the franchise's most recognizable players and a major part of its long-term plans. But the combination of on-court criticism, media attention, and team struggles made the spotlight around her even brighter. Because when a team struggles while a player remains highly visible, the contrast becomes unavoidable. Fans start asking questions. Is the player's brand overshadowing the team's performance? Is the criticism fair? Is the player being judged too harshly? Those debates rarely have simple answers. But they shape perception. And in sports, perception often matters almost as much as reality. Angel Reese was still early in her career. She still had time to improve. She still had the physical tools and competitive fire that made her a star in the first place. But the narrative around her had grown complicated. It wasn't just about rebounding. It wasn't just about scoring. It wasn't just about personality. It was about expectations. And expectations in modern sports are brutal. The moment you become a headline, every performance gets measured against the version of you people expect to see. Which brings the story back to the moment that started everything: the comparison to Michael Jordan. The reason that quote keeps echoing isn't just because people want to mock it. It's because comparisons like that carry a challenge. A challenge to prove something. A challenge to show growth. A challenge to silence critics with performance. Angel Reese hasn't finished writing her story yet. But the next chapter will matter more than any headline or podcast quote ever could. Because in the end, the debate between production and persona only lasts until one thing happens: results. When you step back and look at the entire situation, the story isn't really about one quote or one missed shot. It's about two completely different paths colliding in the spotlight of a rapidly growing league. Angel Reese represents the new era of athletes who understand the power of personality. She knows how to command attention. She knows how to build a brand that extends far beyond the court. Caitlin Clark represents something different. The type of player whose impact shows up everywhere the numbers are counted. Television ratings, ticket sales, sponsorship deals, economic momentum for the league. Both types of influence matter. Both help grow the sport. And that difference has created one of the most fascinating debates the WNBA has ever seen. Who is truly moving the needle? Lisa Leslie's comments revealed something important about that debate. She didn't attack Reese's confidence. She simply pointed out the next step that could transform everything. Fix the finishing. Master the easy points. Turn the one weakness everyone jokes about into a strength. Because if Reese does that, the narrative changes overnight. The memes disappear. The criticism fades. And the same confidence people mocked suddenly starts looking prophetic. That's how sports works. Today's punchline can become tomorrow's redemption story.